Hi, long time no see. I'm here today because 1 month ago today, my baby was born. And so I'd like to talk about it today. Because of the nature of the internet and of YouTube, I think I'm going to refrain from having my baby on camera, but I'll just let you know, he is real dang cute. And you don't have to take my word for it. We actually ended up in the NICU for a couple of days, and all of the NICU nurses, the first thing they said was, my goodness, he's the cutest baby I've ever seen. Like, there was one nurse who came, they said two things. It was, he's so cute, and he has really large feet. He has those like super long feet for a baby. One of the NICU nurses actually said she was told that there was an exceptionally cute baby, so she just stopped by to see him. She wasn't even his nurse. So you don't have to take my word for it. I have a very cute baby. He's super, super cute. That's pretty much the first thing everybody says. Actually, my grandma was an English teacher, and she always said that if someone had a not so cute baby, the thing that she would always say to them is, my, aren't they alert? So nobody's been telling me my baby's alert. My baby is super, super cute. We named him Kai. I wanted to talk about my birth story. For me, something that I found really, really comforting while I was pregnant and even before I was pregnant was hearing kind of people's horror stories about giving birth. Like for me, knowing kind of the worst case scenarios or like how things are really different for everyone really helped me to kind of compartmentalize and like relieve my stress about like what could go wrong. Hearing the bad things really, really, really helped me a lot. I know there's a lot of people who hearing the bad things about a birth story would just make them really, really nervous, really anxious. Like it would make it worse for them. So if you're one of those people, this is not the video for you probably. Just know that we are all happy and healthy and doing great. Kai is doing amazing, growing so fast, already considerably larger than he was when he was born, just growing so fast. So yes, we're doing really, really well. If you're the type of person who hearing about kind of a hard labor and birth would be detrimental to you, go ahead and leave. You don't need to be here. If you're still interested, then I wanted to talk about it. It was kind of traumatic. Actually, for the most part, like our birth plan technically went to plan. Wanted to have the birth at a birthing clinic. We had the entire birth in the birthing clinic. I didn't want to have an epidural, to be honest. There are also like health reasons why doing an epidural can be harder on the body, but I wasn't really weighing those. I just like the idea of an epidural made me so nervous. It's kind of like they offer laughing gas. The idea of laughing gas makes me so nervous that it doesn't outweigh the like pain reducing for me. Like it doesn't work for me. So having an epidural was never in my plan. Like even the idea of going to a hospital was never in my plan. Like that freaked me out quite a bit. And so actually the end part of my pregnancy was probably the hardest part of the whole pregnancy. Like I think I talked about right at about 30 weeks, like the heaviness becomes a lot, just the body changes become a lot, the sleeping at night really decreases, and that kind of continues on. I also never hit the point where I was actually at risk for preeclampsia, but I was at the caution point, like the right there where we were really watching me closely for a good 2 months. Preeclampsia was kind of, we were headed in that direction, unfortunately. So I had a lot of swelling in my feet and my hands. I still have numbness in this hand. This hand, after the birth, I got it a little bit, but not too bad. It's going away finally, but it has been a month since the birth, and I still do have numbness, and I've had the numbness now for over 3 months. So the numbness was a lot. Preeclampsia, we were just getting tested all the time. My husband was taking my blood pressure regularly, and it kept really fluctuating kind of dramatically, so there were some scares and it was kind of painful, and you do get to the point where you like can't do anything. Everything kind of is a lot and you're just really tired all the time. And the swelling in my feet was so bad too. It was a week and a half actually. It was a week and a half early from the due date because Kai came a week before his due date. A week and a half early, we went to the midwives and they were like, technically it would be better if he was born early, because I was like, I really hope he comes on his due date, not before. And they're like, it would actually be better if he came early, not to the point where they're like, we need to induce you, but to the point where it would be healthier and we'd be less at risk if he did come early. And he heard that. Actually, that was the first time I really broke down. I kind of had an emotional breakdown in the clinic because I was like, I don't feel ready, a week and a half early. And luckily my husband's really great, talked me down from that, because it was just like, you spend 9 months dealing with something one way, and then the idea of how dramatically it's going to change is a lot. This is like a really dramatic change when at first the baby's like safe and with you all the time, and now they're a separate entity. that's a lot. We talked about it and it was okay, and we sort of were like, okay, well, we'll try doing some, like some silly things, like have some spicy food, that kind of stuff, to try and help progress things along. That was on a Wednesday or a Thursday. That weekend, it was like Saturday night, I was like, okay, tomorrow, if baby hasn't come tonight, then tomorrow I'm gonna have some spicy food. So Sunday I went into work, because I work Sunday through Thursdays. I went into work on Sunday. Really at the end of my shift, like the last 2 hours of my shift, I started feeling like different kind of cramp, because there's like the cramp that's very much a period cramp, and then there's a totally different cramp that I think the main thing is, I was looking online and it's like, if it starts in your back, that's the sign. And it was starting in my back, but it was like super manageable. So I totally finished my shift. This is gonna be a disjointed video because of getting up to feed him. But anyway, so labor started while I was at work, but it wasn't that bad, so I just like stayed at work for the last 2 hours of my shift. I had been planning on that whole week just kind of setting things up so that while I was gone, nobody needed anything that only I had, kind of. So I kind of speed ran that in 2 hours, like as many things as I could think of that they might need, just in case, because like if this is labor, then I won't be here tomorrow. But in case if it's not, then it's not. But then once I got home, it was like, this kind of feels like labor. So I suddenly was like in major cleaning mode. I was like, things need to get done. I need to move all of this stuff all around. Finally got to the point where I was like, this feels totally different from anything else, and it's getting more consistent. So I let my doula know. I let my midwives know. I started texting Josh, just being like, no hurry, but just don't be home late today. And he actually was on a call, so he was up helping people way up on the mountain. So one of the dispatchers who we're friends with called and was just like, is everything okay? I was like, just please don't have him be late. And like, he's gonna be a little bit late. So he didn't get home until, I think it was about 7:30 he got home. And by then it was like, this is labor for sure. Once he got home, it really ramped. I think I had eaten dinner by that point, but I just had like a salad and eggs. And it was getting more and more intense. So I was like, I should keep eating. The advice from the doula was try and sleep. If you can sleep, then that's great. If you can't, then, So I took a hot shower. That felt really, really good. Especially during the labor pains, a hot shower felt so good. I lay down to go to bed, and it was like, that like clicked something in. I was like, no, laying down is way worse. Probably, I think at that point we were like, let's give it till about 10 o'clock, and at 10 o'clock we'll go in, because we're about an hour and a half away from the birthing center. So we had always kind of planned everything out so that we would be there at a reasonable time. So I think about 9:30 I threw up, and that was really when it was like, okay, we have to go. I threw up everything. I threw up so much. It was like what I didn't expect to, because I threw up like 3 times in the first trimester. I had an easy first trimester in terms of throwing up. I didn't throw up any other time during pregnancy, and then during labor threw up. But it wasn't like that bad. The thing with labor pain, especially like driving there, wasn't that bad, because like last year this time I had my sprained ankle, and that's just constant pain. That's the kind of pain where like you can do things to like lessen it, like put ice on it or take painkillers, but there's always pain. But with the labor pain, it's like really, really intense, really horrible, and then it's totally gone, to the point where you're like gaslighting yourself about it. Like I kept being like, maybe I just made it up, maybe it wasn't that bad, maybe we're leaving too early, like maybe I'm not gonna be far enough along and we're gonna have to wait a whole long time, like maybe this is all in my head, that kind of thing. Like it's so completely like all the pain and then absolutely nothing, that it was really weird actually. Especially with driving, it would be like, oh my god, this hurts so bad, like having to hold on to the oh shit bar. What do you even call that little handle thing? Holding on to that, and like so much pain, can barely pay attention to anything, and then just totally gone and back in a conversation again. And so it was just, it's weird. It's weird pain. I would take that pain over the sprained ankle, because the sprained ankle was so intense constantly and for such a long period, and this was all like short bursts of really horrible pain. So that was strange. By the time we got to the clinic, I was already, I think, at 6 centimeters. So we got there like exactly perfection kind of timing. Really, really good. And then it was just really intense. I had a hard labor, but it wasn't, I think from start to finish, it was about 14 hours. So not like super short, but not super, super long. And the worst part of it was really concentrated in about 4 hours, because we were there by about midnight. He was born at 4:46 in the morning. up until crowning, everything kind of was going totally to plan. We waited until I was kind of at the point where I was needing to push, then got into the tub because I was gonna have a water birth. I felt really good. A water birth is so nice, honestly. Like the hot water just feels so good at the time. I was in a good position. Everything was going well. My water hadn't broken. My water actually broke like right before crowning, which was really good for us because I am an O negative blood type. I think he's gonna be happier if he sits with me. So anyway, so I'm O negative blood type, so I had to have a shot in advance, but also there's some risk for me if our blood were to mix. There's some risk for him if our blood were to mix. So the water breaking late was like a really, really good thing. It pretty much broke, and then it was like crowning phase, and that was really hard. That was when the pain was to the point where like I didn't feel like I could do this some of the time. It was pretty bad, but our midwife is incredible. And so she was actually, we were finally in like ultimate pushing position, like kind of hands and knees over the side of the tub, definitely crowning. Like I was feeling it was kind of burning, and she was actually like trying to hold my tissues together so I wouldn't tear. And somewhere in that process, and I was just like worn out by that time. It's a full body workout, or at least it was for me. The next day, well, like the next to next day, because this is gonna be a long story. The next day, I was just like, I had muscles I didn't even know I had were sore. It was just like so much tension. But so she was gonna hold my tissues together basically so I wouldn't tear so much. And at some point in the process of him crowning, the midwife realized something was wrong, and that's when everything kind of changed. Okay, somewhere after the crowning process was when she realized that something was wrong. So my husband was all set up to catch. He was super involved, super present the entire time, and he was ready to catch baby when it came. But somewhere in the process, yeah, midwife realized something wasn't going correctly. So I didn't really realize. The one thing that I sort of clued into was I was like, I am definitely tearing. Everything really burns. It really hurts. And they had stopped really, everyone was super encouraging, everyone was super, super nice, but they hit a point where even my husband was like, no, you need to keep pushing. And that was when I sort of was like, that doesn't sound good. So once they were saying you need to keep pushing, it was like, you're just gonna have to fight through this pain and just do this. Like, people do this all the time, you're gonna have to just do this. So that wasn't great for me, but I was really able to focus on myself. And I didn't know anything was going wrong necessarily beyond that point until quite a bit later, until actually we were transferring to a children's hospital. At that point, it was just like, get him out, get him out. At one point, they asked me to stand up, and I was like, I cannot do it. I did do it. I did all of this without an epidural. I did all of this on my own, so I'm very proud of me. But I did get up on my feet, and then it was the first time we were out of the water. So that was sort of another, like maybe a little clue in, but I was like, we just gotta get this baby out. So I got up, so I was standing facing away while they were dealing with the baby. When he did come out, I was able to kind of collapse and rest. My doula was able to focus on me. My husband and the midwife were able to focus on the baby. And then when I was sort of able to turn around and get into a position where I could hold him, they gave him to me. And he was a little like pre-purple and pretty limp, but I was like, it's a newborn baby. This is probably fine. So I was just like holding him. We had two slight issues then, which was that the cord to the placenta was pretty short, like maybe only like a foot or so. It was pretty short, and the placenta was not coming out. So I was still sitting in the tub, and it got to the point where they're like, we kind of probably should get you out of the tub because you guys are going to get cold for one thing. So got me out of the tub. My husband just kind of manhandled me on out while I was holding Kai. We got to the bed and lay down there. And my placenta still wasn't coming. It actually wasn't coming to the point that the cord blood had come out. The cord was ready to cut basically, and the placenta still wasn't coming. So they ended up cutting the cord. I had planned to wait until the placenta came out. That was the whole idea. But it was at the point where it was like, we need to cut it so that he can get all cleaned up. It was all done anyway. So they did that. My placenta took like a long time to come. They actually gave me something really bitter under my tongue and had me kind of squat on this little thing on the floor, and that was how we got it out eventually. But it was actually in there for quite a long time, to the point where it was a little bit of a concern, I guess. And then Josh was able to hold Kai during that time, and I was like, okay, we did it. Like, I got the baby. He's super cute. He had kind of a cone head at first, and he was a little bit purple still, and he wasn't crying. And I think those things were were possibly concerning everyone else, but I was just like, this is how baby is. It's fine, because I was getting all the happy chemicals. I've been super lucky in the chemical department all through the pregnancy until like probably the last 2 weeks or so. My anxiety was like taken care of. Like everything was really balanced. The hormones were really good, and I've been getting all of the good hormones since. And I guess some of that is not when you get induced or you have an epidural, sometimes your body doesn't create all the happy chemicals, but I've been getting all the happy lovey chemicals. Like it's been real good for me on that side. So I was still just like birthing high. Plus all of the pain was gone. It was like I was bleeding a lot and I was a mess, but the pain was gone. So I was actually like, this is all okay now. It's weird. I feel exhausted. Like I was super exhausted. I was so thirsty through the whole labor. I was so thirsty. I just constantly was asking for water. I think I downed at least a water bottle and a half during that time. I was really thirsty. And Gatorade. I downed a whole Gatorade and then continuously threw up that Gatorade. The labor, I threw up like 5 or 6 times during labor. Super fun. But yeah, it was all done. So I was just like, great, this is good. Once they had the placenta out, all good on that end. Everything seemed like it was okay to me, but he wasn't really crying still. He was sort of grunting a lot. Finally, the midwife helped me get set up to try and breastfeed him for the first time. This was within the first hour of being born. They should try and, latch on and try and breastfeed. And he really wasn't interested. And that was probably when she was the most concerned. And I was still like, it's fine, we're gonna figure it out. I was totally okay. Midwife left to consult with a pediatrician that she knew, just to make sure everything was okay. We kind of stayed with Kai, made sure everything was good with us, just chilling basically a little bit. And I was also on IV for all of this time. So I was on IV fluids. I had a lot of IV fluids, actually. They had me on lactated ringers. I took a lot of lactated ringers, and they ended up putting something in that to try and stop the bleeding. So even though I was like, I was cool, I was good, I was also probably having some health concerns, partly with the placenta and partly with just the amount I'd thrown up. So I was probably pretty dehydrated, but I didn't know that. I was doing fine. In the end, they decided, just out of precaution, because he wasn't necessarily breathing correctly, we would transfer to Children's, and they had done some oxygen, some different things to try and like get clear stuff out of his lungs, normal things that you would do to try and clear everything out of his lungs, and he still just wasn't interested in eating. And so she kind of explained it, breathing is their primary function, so the first thing they're focused on is breathing, because that's super important. Then the secondary function is eating. So once the breathing is taken care of, babies will then want to eat. That he wasn't eating meant that something was not going correctly with the breathing. They ended up getting me all cleaned up, and we were planning to transfer to Children's Hospital just to make sure everything was okay. Kind of abundance of caution kind of thing. Like he was alive and good, and I was doing okay, but I was bleeding a lot. So I got partly cleaned up, and then firefighters came to transfer us. I will say my husband, his big advice is always refuse private ambulances. He worked as a private ambulance EMT for a year and a half, and he said always deny them for interfacility transport. For emergencies, take whoever you got, doesn't matter. But for interfacility transport, never take a private ambulance. So the firefighters agreed to take us. Kai and I rode in the ambulance with the midwife, with the firefighters, and we went lights and sirens to the hospital, and I was still just like, this is all fine. I was holding the breathing apparatus for Kai. They're just kind of giving him like extra oxygen, so I was holding it like away from his face, little baby mask, just to give him some extra oxygen, and they were monitoring his oxygen the entire time. The midwife had a little cuff on him, and it was one of those things that was kind of going up and down, but not like into super danger territory. Like he was breathing, it just was not as high of oxygen level all the time. And the firefighters were really great. And the whole transfer, because it was a pretty far transfer actually for us to get to the Children's Hospital from the birthing clinic, they were really good. The firefighter kept adjusting his hat because I had him in one arm and was holding the breathing apparatus, and so the firefighter kept putting his hat back on because the little cone head kept popping the little hat back off. And it was raining that morning. It was raining in July. This happened in the end of July. And it was supposed to be a hot summer, I thought, but then the cool weather hit and hasn't really warmed back up completely since then. But so it rained that morning. We transferred to the hospital, and my husband like drove the car behind us. By the time we got to the hospital, I was just like, I have to pee so bad. And everyone at the hospital was super, super nice. They actually asked if I wanted to hold the baby, and I was like, I have to pee so bad. So they took the baby, held me to the bathroom. Someone got a wheelchair for me and everything. They got me water. Like, they were so, so nice to me. And they were so caring to the baby. Like, everyone was fantastic there. And they just ran a bunch of tests, see if what was wrong, see if anything was wrong. And so that was kind of when I sort of started to learn what had happened and kind of like process what had actually happened. Not even like 4 days before, we had had ultrasound. He was in a great position for birthing. Like, there were no concerns ahead of time, just to let you know. Everything looked good. He was in a like optimum birthing position. When it came time, I was in optimum birthing position. Everything was good, but somewhere in labor, he got turned just the wrong way, basically. So he ended up having both shoulders get stuck. And so with both shoulders being stuck, then it created like quite a complication. So him being stuck is really the reason why his airways weren't working correctly. And luckily, the midwife is fantastic. Honestly, midwives are amazing. I mean, one of the things about the benefit of having a midwife is like babies and birth is what they do. So whereas a doctor does many, many things and has other scenarios in mind, midwives are just babies. So they are experts in that field. So when she realized something was wrong, she knew what to do. And so our midwife, I absolutely think she's the reason that Kai and I are here today. Oh, especially Kai. I believe that she's the reason why he's okay. He had to have both shoulders like dislocated basically in order to come out from the position he was in. And she had to turn him quite a bit to get him to come out. So that was I had quite a bit of tearing, partly just the maneuvering him to get him out because he was so stuck. And he doesn't have large shoulders. And she said it doesn't usually matter. Like, his head was not particularly big, his shoulder span was not particularly wide. And yeah, and she said she's seen like people humongous shoulders come out, just fly on out of there, and babies with even more narrow shoulders than Kai has get stuck. So, but having both shoulders stuck, I guess, was unusual. It was the worst she'd ever seen. So yeah, so he was stuck for a little bit. That was really when they were telling me I had to keep pushing, even though it was hurting. So again, I didn't know until then. So he had both shoulders stuck. And actually, the interesting thing is when she was telling that, luckily the midwife was there because I didn't know anything that had happened. So she was able to answer all the questions for the medical team once we were at the hospital. She said that it was the worst she's ever seen. It sounds like it was for most of the emergency children's hospital team. It was the worst they'd ever seen too. Like, people thought, oh, I've never even heard of that. So both shoulders stuck, pretty bad actually. And so there were a lot of concerns that they had based on that, like, were his clavicles going to be okay, was all of his bones going to be okay, what could have broken, what could have been misplaced, what could have been twisted the wrong way. So there were x-rays, there's obviously oxygen, heat lamps keeping him warm, and he was real chill for most of it. Like, lights and sirens, ambulance, the first thing he ever experienced. So actually he's great with noises do not concern him. But even with hooked up to the machine, he was pretty chill up until they were like poking his heels all the time to get blood out for blood tests. That was what really upset him, and trying to get a little IV in him really upset him because they had trouble with that. Otherwise, he was pretty chill. And they had a recliner for me because I was having just given birth and torn and all of that. Was not supposed to be standing. I should have been on bed rest for 2 weeks. But instead I was in a hospital. So once my husband caught up, we were there, they were running tests, they were deciding what to do, and they decided he had some concerns, but they weren't severe enough concerns that he needed to have like cryotherapy, I guess is something they do with babies when they have like serious problems. They sort of freeze them to slow things down if there's a concern that, like, the brain won't develop correctly. And I guess there wasn't enough of a concern for that, so they didn't do that. So back to the birth part. So he had both shoulders stuck, and so when he came out, he had to be resuscitated. And I guess that's, with babies, it's like, it's not quite the same as like resuscitating a person, adult person, because with babies, their airway is the most important thing. So giving him oxygen right away was the resuscitation. It wasn't that like he wasn't going to have brain death because of it, because it was very, very quick. It sounds very scary, and I was very scared about it once I kind of realized what was going on. And I think the midwife also realized how kind of traumatizing the whole thing was, probably for both of us, because she did talk to us about it quite a bit. But he wasn't like the best scenario. Like she resuscitated him very, very quickly, but he did have to be resuscitated, and that was really kind of why everything was a major concern. From the main children's hospital, they actually ended up transferring us to a different hospital that had more room in their NICU and that was closer to us, even though probably in hindsight should have stayed at the one we were at and just refused to go. That was the first time things were traumatic for me at the time. And that was that they had to transfer him separately. They had a specialized team to transfer Kai in this like whole little space chamber. But I couldn't go with them because I was actively bleeding still at the time. We had to drive separately. That was very hard for me. I gotta say, I am very, very grateful that we had the birth fully with the midwife, because she was very quick to give Kai to me. It's very important to the midwives that the baby remains with the mother and is close to the mother very quickly. Whereas at the hospital, if he'd have been in the same situation, they'd have probably taken him away from me quicker. Hospitals are much more hands-off for the parents. Medical procedures take the forefront, which is important and good, but I'm glad we weren't in a hospital for the birth. It could have gone worse medically and emotionally if we had been in a hospital for the birth. But anyway, so we transferred to the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit at a different hospital, and got checked in there. By that point, he was breathing fine. In the transport, they gave him oxygen, and by the time he got there, he was really doing really, really well. But they had to run a whole bunch of tests, and so it was kind of a waiting for tests to come back. And so at first it was like, it's going to be at least 24 hours, then it was going to be at least 48 hours. We ended up spending 4 days, 3 nights in NICU. And that was not fun at all. The reason was, at first, just have to run a whole bunch of tests, make sure he's okay and stable. And the main concern in the end was his bilirubin, which is what causes jaundice. His score for that was concerning and kind of rising. Eventually, we had to do light therapy with him, where he wears this little mask and they strap him into this blue light machine, and he sits in this blue light machine. He was in there for like 12 hours. So that was tons of fun. But that was on the 3rd day. From the point where like woke up Sunday morning till we actually got to sleep was Monday night at 9:30-ish. So we were up from like 7 a.m. on Sunday till about 9:30 on Monday. 9:30 p.m. We were awake the entire time. So we were pretty tired. And we were just living at the hospital, because the hospital was an hour and a half away from our house. So it's not like we just go home, and not like I was just gonna leave my newborn baby when I also couldn't like walk. I had to be pushed around in a wheelchair the entire time we were there. So it was a lot to deal with. It was very trying. Every time it was like, okay, in the morning, like, okay, we gotta go home now. And they're like, no, we're gonna keep you another day. It was pretty much devastating. I think one of the things that was nice for us is that's the whole point where the poop for the baby is like really, really sticky, like black tar. We didn't have to deal with that. The NICU nurses took care of that, so that was good for us. Maybe also good for us is that about the 3-day mark is when postpartum can kind of set in. It's when the hormone drop happens. I think they called it milk drop. When your milk drop happens, that's when you can hit some severe depression. But mine was all focused in on the fact that we weren't getting to go home. So rather than having just like wild, uncertain depression, I had very focused upsettedness. And I think that helped me to regulate it. So in a way that was a good thing, even though it was pretty bad and we were really on our last legs. Also, with him coming a week early, we weren't ready for a lot of things. Like, my parents were going to be here on the 1st. He was born on the 29th. They're going to be here on the 1st. In order to be here in advance so they could like watch the cats and things, we had to figure out other ways for people to come and watch our cats. Like, we had to get a whole situation figured out because of him coming early and then us getting transferred. Like, we were planning on coming home in time to feed the cats. But yeah, 4 days we ended up in the NICU, and he was really good during that time. Like, and I got to talk to lactation consultants and figure out breastfeeding and not pumping and all of that. So like there were good things, but it was not fun. And it was also like the only thing we were waiting on for the last day that we had to be there. Last night we had to be there was the bilirubin test after the light therapy. And so it was just like, it was frustrating. It was frustrating and hard. And then by the time we were finally coming home, it was so off of what would have been a normal like processing period for us. One of the other good things is that Kai sleeps great in the car. He pretty much slept the whole way home from the hospital for an hour and a half drive. He sleeps really good when we go to the grocery store. Like we have no trouble bringing him to his appointments. If he goes on a stroller ride now, he loves that and sleeps through that. So he's really good in moving vehicles, which is fantastic. I'd rather have just brought him home right away. You know, he also sleeps through noises. Like you can vacuum, you can alarms, anything can go off. He has no issue with it because the hospital was noisy, and the lights and sirens is the first thing he experienced. Things that are good, but also like us then adjusting and processing was very hard. Luckily my parents were here for the first 2 weeks, so they were able to help quite a bit, getting us on our feet, getting used to the transition. I mean, we had then, rather than having to figure everything out like right away early on with Kai, the nurses were taking care of him at night and we were getting to sleep, which like is a good and a bad thing. And also they were giving him bottles, they were giving him donor milk because my milk hadn't come in, so I wasn't getting like the process that I had been expecting to get, especially like breastfeeding and the initial process. So we were having to kind of figure that back out again once we got home. And so that was a little bit rough, but for the most part, okay. It's sort of one of those things where it's like processing the trauma of what happened is hard because I didn't necessarily experience it, because like with all the chemicals going on and also having not witnessed everything, for me, it's just like the what ifs of everything is scary, but then the actual like, the body really tries to make you forget. Like if I didn't have to then recall everything that had been happening kind of over and over to like explain why we're in the NICU, to talk to the nurses and everything, like all the new nurses, explain to them what happened to him. If I hadn't had to like reprocess everything over and over again, like talk about it, I probably would have forgotten all of it because the body wants to forget all of it. But instead it sort of got ingrained, which I think made it a little bit extra hard. And yeah, it was kind of traumatizing, but like in a vague, uncertain way for me. The first time we went back to the birth clinic for an appointment was real weird, and I did have sort of like a PTSD moment. Like I didn't want to go inside at first, and going back it just kind of like wakes that up again. So I just cry at my appointments, which is a little embarrassing, to be honest. It's hard to talk about things, but I thought if I talk about it here, that it can possibly help someone else, because again, I want to like pay it forward. Hearing about people's birth stories really helped me. I thought it was really cathartic for me, so if it helps anybody else to hear about ours, hopefully that helps somebody. Yeah, it wasn't a fun time, but he is really cute. It is really like all the happy chemicals worked for me. The happy chemicals that are supposed to happen with birth really worked, because it is just like every time I hold him, I feel like the oxytocin like comes through. He smells so good. When he is breastfeeding, it feels so good. Like the happy chemicals just like come through really well. If I'm not with him, there's a little bit of a panickiness where it's like, where's my baby? So holding him is really like the nicest thing. And yeah, I do get just like happy chemicals, and then like holding him and looking at him, especially like now he started smiling. It's just like, oh my god, I love you so much. Like I love this baby so much. But it was a hard birth, and the recovery for me has been real slow. The first 2 weeks were pretty bad in terms of the downstairs department for me. It took about 3 weeks until walking was really something that wasn't a painful thing to do. So we just very recently started doing little walks, and that's been really nice. Getting out and doing walks has been great. We took him to Costco for the first time because he sleeps so well. So we just put the whole baby car seat into the cart, and he just sleeps the whole time. So we're like, great, we can do grocery shopping, not a problem. And I can just push the cart, and that was fine. Everything has been, we're getting used to things. It's like every few days is like a new phase and stuff. But yeah, so that's kind of what was going on at the beginning of the month for me. Beginning of August was stressful. End of July to the beginning of August, we went home on the 1st. Yeah, we're just really, really lucky. I can't recommend a good midwife enough. Like, I'm so happy that technically the birth part of my birth plan went to plan. It was just the after of the birth plan very much did not go to plan. Couldn't have asked for a better team helping with the birth. They were just so great. My doula was so great, focusing me on myself, focusing on me. Husband was so great and really present and like ready for everything, and able to focus on the situation and kind of take care of that. He deals with medical trauma very, very well. So he really went into like patient mode with Kai, with what was going on with him. So he doesn't feel necessarily as traumatized by that. He actually told me crying and screaming during the labor was probably more upsetting to him than what was happening with Kai, because of course he trusted our midwife and she took care of everything so well. So he was able to kind of trust all of that, even though he had to see what was going on and I did not see what happened. He has a really good mindset for that kind of stuff, luckily. And then for me, it's really just the vague what ifs, and then kind of remembering just like how bad the labor was. It was very, very painful. It was very exhausting, and that I didn't get to forget it, whereas I know my body was trying to. I think I wish I could have. There's also a couple of times as the head was like just barely, not necessarily crying, but like just barely starting to come out, where they asked if I wanted to reach down and feel the baby's head coming out. And at the time I was like, absolutely not. If I do that, I will not get this baby out. Like, can't do it, must focus in. So I refused. Thinking back, it would have been nice if I had done that, but I could not have it at the time. I'm also like, I fully now understand why people go for an epidural, and I fully understand why they go for a C-section, because it was real painful. It was real painful. But I am proud of myself that I didn't do that, that I did what the body was supposed to. The body then released the chemicals it was supposed to, so things were okay. But it was real hard. It was real difficult. So like I think I kind of looked down on people who like opted for what looked like the easier option, doing the epidural or doing a C-section and like not dealing with all of it. But like, I got respect for that now. Having not done those things, I've got respect for it now, because it is a lot. But again, it's like the intensity and then gone. Like, no lingering pains, no throbbing, nothing. It's just like when the labor pain ends, it's gone. So if you have a high pain tolerance, I almost recommend that route, because then there's no recovery from all these other things going on. And if you don't have to relive your trauma over and over and over again for 4 days in the NICU, then you will just forget about it. Like, it'll just be gone from your body. It's not something you're recovering from. You're not recovering from the labor. You're recovering from the birth part, like the actual baby and placenta coming out, but you're not recovering from all of that pain, you know? Yeah, like I said before, like I would take that over spraining my ankle again. We're not planning on having more kids. that was trauma enough for us. That was good. I love this baby plenty, so don't need another one. That's my birth story. Hopefully that's helpful to someone, comforting to someone. I don't know if that's comforting or not, but we got through everything. That's the main thing. Like, we got through it all. We're all good. That's what I've been up to. That's the birth story. I don't know if I have anything else to say about that, so I probably will just leave this video here. I'll try and answer any questions you have down below. I don't know how fast I'll be back to making like normal videos. We've only had this baby a month. We're still getting used to things, but we're getting closer to the point where I can actually like do things like this. Sit down and talk for over half hour. So hopefully I'll talk to you again soon, but that's all for me today. Bye!